Well, good morning, church. Thank you for joining us for our daily Devo. Today, we're in Hebrews chapter 13. And I was thinking, I've been in pastoral ministry for 40 years. And every church I've been a part of would want to be known as a loving church. And yet, so many times we think about being a loving church, we look at everybody else and we think, are they being loving? As opposed to looking to ourselves first and say, are we being loving? In other words, if we're going to be a loving church, it doesn't start with those out there, but it starts with us making that choice. And it's not about warm feelings, but it's about taking direction or taking steps in three directions. First, it's our love towards those we already know, our love towards those people we don't know, and towards people that many have forgotten. And so let's look at that really at the first three verses. In verse 1, we look at loving those that we know. We're told to keep on loving each other as brothers and sisters. Now, I love this. The first fact that it calls brothers and sisters. And I love the picture of a church as a family. It's not a business. It's not an organization, though it has business principles and we operate in organizational principles. First and foremost, we're a family. That's why in the South, we tend to call each other brother and sister, because the idea is we are to be connected. And yet we know being a brother and sister doesn't call you to love someone. All we have to do is get back from Thanksgiving and know sometimes those are challenging. So it just says, keep on loving each other. In other words, we need to love those around us that we know. We need to make a choice. See, if you're part of a church, then you're called to be part of a community. A church is not to be a place you just pop off, you pop in, you pop off, and you pop out. It's to be a place of community. And if the church is really being what it's called to be, you know that over time, you're going to find some of your closest friends being in church. And so there should be that picture. Jesus said that even the world would know that we belong to him because we love one another. And if you love someone, you have to get involved in their life. That's why life groups are so important to us, because when it comes to being at church, it's great to be in worship and it's fantastic. But it's in those small connections of one to one that we're able to love each other, care for one another, serve one another, and it happens. We first have to be committed to loving those that we know. Next, we need to show hospitality to those who are around us. He tells us not to forget to show hospitality to strangers, for some have done this, have entertained angels without knowing it. Now, we could get into a whole theological talk about entertaining angels and go to Old Testament passages when there were angels and the people around didn't know. But I think what the author of Hebrews is just trying to say is, guys, I want to let you know that when you invest, when you care for those around you, those who are strangers, you're doing something of a high calling, and it may be higher than you can even imagine. A matter of fact, the word hospitality literally means to love strangers. See, it's one thing to love those that we know, but we're even called to love those that we don't know. One of the great stories in the New Testament is the parable of the Good Samaritan. A matter of fact, that's such a powerful story that even people who don't go to church know that story. It's helping someone in need, someone you have no connection to. And see, if we're going to be a loving church, one of the things we have to do is show hospitality. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that it's easy to come to church and you're in a community of people you know, you love, you like. And it's so easy as soon as you walk in the door to look for that person you know, to find them, to talk to them, to find out what happened in their week. And again, that first point, to love those that are around you, that's great. But we're not to stop there. See, we have to leave room to love those who may walk in our door as a stranger. If you're a member of a church, there was a day, most likely, you walked in and you were a stranger. Now, you may have been growing up in the church, but for most of us, we came to a church and there was a day where we knew no one, and yet people opened up their life to us. Sometimes church is like playing, Red Robin. You remember the old game? You lock hands and you call someone and they got to break through, and only if they can break the lock can they be a member of your group. And we're like that sometimes. I think one of the greatest illustrations is that of a Lego. A Lego only has so many places you can click in. And once all those places are full, you can't click in any more Lego blocks. And for some of us, we come into church and our Lego's full. In other words, we're not needing anybody else, but we need to make sure we always keep some space open for those we don't know, those strangers. Those that we can show hospitality and care for. In other words, how can they become part of us if we don't open the door and let them in? And sometimes without knowing it, people will come to a church and feel like, yeah, they seem nice to each other, but it's like I didn't exist. See, we need to make sure that they're seen, that they can be known, that we reach out, that we ask them to come and join our group. See, we are to show hospitality to those around us. And if we're going to be that loving church, the third point in verse 3 is we're to care for the forgotten. Let me read that verse in verse 3. It says, remember those in prison as if you were there yourself. Remember also those who are being mistreated as if you felt their pain in your own bodies. Now, I love this. We talked about loving those around us. We talked about having hospitality, loving strangers. Now we're talking about caring for the forgotten. See, in that day, if you were in prison, you were forgotten. There were no rules of conduct. People would go into prison. They'd get sick. They would die. The prison basically would just hold them. It didn't really care for them. And if you had someone in prison, you could go and you could provide supplemental food. You could provide care. You could provide things for them. And if someone went to prison and had no one to check on them, there's a good chance they're going to die. And the verse here, the author of Hebrews saying, hey, imagine as if you were in prison, how would you want to be treated? He talks about, again, those being mistreated, taken advantage of, that to step in and to care for them. All through Proverbs in the Bible, we can see where it talks about the importance of taking care of orphans and widows and those who are being mistreated. And so the idea is, are we reaching people others have forgotten? In our society, there's a lot of people who feel forgotten. There's a lot of people who feel like, who cares for me? And see, in the first part, we love those who are in our church walking around us. The second point, we love those who walk in our door, who are strangers to us. But here is where we pursue those who are even separated from us. This is going to visit a shut-in. This is going out to where someone's in need. This is where we see a need, like the Good Samaritan. We step in and we meet that need. In other words, are we willing to care for those who others have forgotten? One of the pictures of the church throughout history has been caring for the forgotten, from setting up hospitals and leopard colonies to going into places and caring for the forgotten. It's always been a picture that we've been called to do. Imagine if we were that kind of church. Imagine we were a church when we walk in, can't wait to see each other, and we're loving on each other and checking on each other and praying for each other and caring for each other. But you know what? It doesn't stop there. When the stranger walks in, we're not so busy caring for those that we know and love that we don't have enough time to care for the new ones who God has brought into our church. And then in our society, when we're walking around and we see people in need, we just don't think somebody else will do it. We think, what is my part to care for that person? What if I was in their place? How would I want to be treated? And in doing that, we really are becoming a loving church, that church God has called us to be. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for our daily Devo. I hope you'll continue tomorrow, and I hope you have a blessed day.